Hey guys and gals, all you talented OR27 musicians, all you worthy musicians. This is Philippe, and I'm going to do another RTV critique session, and this time I'm going to critique task number 2, which, if you remember, was the recording studio experience. I've got a lot of experience in recording, many decades of recording, and there was something I was looking for in this task that I just did not get. I don't know if it was the maybe lack of clarity in the expectation of the cast in the task, but there was just something lacking, and it could be a generational thing. You never know. But let me just remind you what the criteria was. There were 5 criteria in this task. It was the use of time efficiently, teamwork, the quality of the experience, overcoming challenges, and the overall process. And if you are not aware by now, Reindeer is all about process, and that's what I was looking for in this task, and I was just left disappointed by almost 3 bands. I'll explain that in a second. But I guess I'm finding that I'm talking in terms of traditional recording, when you go into a studio and you pay somebody money and you get, an engineer there that tracks everything and helps you arrange it and helps you produce it and whatnot. Nowadays, everybody has their own software on their computers, so the concept of like time equals money is not as pressing as it was if you are going into a traditional studio setting. And I guess that's a really important lesson that I don't think anybody learned by this task, because they didn't have to pay for their recording studio experience because it was in their living room or their garage or whatever, which is good. It's really great that you're able to make use of whatever available resources there are, and that is absolutely wonderful. In general, there's another thing that I found really lacking, and that's the concept of building tracks. When you go into a studio, when you're building a song, you start from the bottom. If you don't have a solid foundation in the rhythm tracks, which is the bass, the rhythm guitar, and the drums, that's the whole foundation of a song. If that's not built up properly, you can't. It's really dangerous to keep adding tracks on top of that, because you'll never get it right. It's like building a house on shifting sand. It's just never going to come together. And I didn't sense that any of you 3 bands really understood that concept. But then again, there's a lot of time to learn. And maybe you'll learn from this task, and that's what I love about this process, because there's always something else to learn about this. So let me start with St. Monday. You all did well, by the way, keeping it in the 10-minute time format. That was very good, and a lot of the footage was entertaining. That certainly can't take that away from you. But whether it was pertinent to the task or whether there was any content there as far as learning, I didn't quite see it. So let's start with St. Monday. You guys did, you found how to use the time-lapse effect. And so for a good portion of the 10 minutes, it was, a fast-forward movie of watching somebody go into a booth, come out, go into a booth, somebody else come in, come out, and then you started with the guitar track first. That was the first thing you showed. That came out. Then the drum track was done, and then the guitar solos were put in, and then more drums were put on, and then you did the miking of the bass, and then you did a bass solo, and then you did the voices, which was good that you did the voices last. But I cannot for the life of me figure out why, if a band is starting to record a song, they would start with the guitar tracks alone. And then you add the drums after that. That's just kind of like, it's just really backwards to me. But I understand looking at that footage, that you probably had some isolation issues. You weren't able to isolate, so you had to do things that way, and you probably did the things that you were most familiar with and most comfortable with first, which is understandable, certainly understandable, but bass and drums, should be always the first. That's the bottom of the foundation. You just got to start there. I don't understand why you start with guitar tracking. Anyway, it was kind of tedious after a while, because we got the point, one person goes into a door, comes out. It was just, there was nothing to learn, and it was silent. There was no explanation of what was going on. You did have the titles, which did help a little bit. I can't, so that was good. But I didn't have, was this done in an hour? Was this done over a day? Was this done over a period of a month? And another thing I kind of took from this footage was, did everybody just hang around all day if it was done all day? And was that necessary, of everybody hanging around? Again, going back to the criteria of using time effectively, you don't need everybody there, and you don't need friends in the background in the peanut gallery, watching you. That just creates more tension and more distraction for a band. And you don't need, if you're going to do the drum tracks, you don't need 40 people there. So it was difficult for me to find anything as far as efficient planning, or what your process was in your submission. The result, you got a great song. That is, that's not the point. But there was no explanation of how this song was built. There was nothing for the viewer to take away from this experience, and that was really disappointing. So I think you just did not accomplish the expectation for this task. And let's go to Last Man in Space. You got a nice band room. It's got a beautiful view of, the outside and everything. That's kind of nice. But you did it in two sections, day one and day two. Day one, I had no idea what was going on. You were sitting around. I guess you were talking because you could hear very, very faintly some voices, but you couldn't hear what was being said. So what's the point? And it was like being on a 3D roller coaster ride in Orlando called the Recording Studio Experience. The camera person, God bless the camera person, just it really made everybody dizzy. Just like, phew, somebody said a word there, and then phew, somebody said a word there, and it would just go back and forth and back and forth. And the poor viewer that was trying to get something out of this experience was like getting a little dizzy. So the first part was like, it was just kind of aggravating. It was dead footage. It was just dead. There was nothing there. And I guess it seemed like a lot of jamming and improvising, and I don't know. I don't know what was going on. And then in the day two segment, okay, now it's time to record, and I got the impression that Alessandro was directing this, facilitating this process, probably because he owned the software, and he probably had some knowledge of running it. And I say probably because, again, there's no explanation to the audience of what's going on. All we see is like four guys just jamming and playing, and we don't know what's been tracked. We don't know what's needed to be tracked, what the order is. We don't know if there's any challenges in there, if there's any lessons. There was no planning. There was no sense of planning. I don't know. So, there was just not much to take away from that as far as process. It almost falls in the same kind of category of St. Monday. And again, I know you had a great result from the session, but there's just no explanation. If this was a documentary of how to put a song together, they would have taken you off the air. And now we go to the Resistance, and I just got to say bravo to the Resistance. They were the only ones that had any kind of sense of planning for this and sense of layering. They did have a shaky camera, which was a little weird. But Jared was clearly in charge, and aptly so, and he gave a great description of all the equipment that was going to be used, and it was nice gear, and it was, he gave technical descriptions of just how he wanted to map things out, and this is going to go here, this is going to get cable to that, and this is going to get patched into that, and this is what we're going to do, and blah, 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 blah. So the audience right off sensed that, oh, okay, this is a process, and let's see if they can do it. And then they started, it seemed like it started with the drum tracking, which is, again, it's just really difficult to track drums first. But I'm not going to say anything beyond that. But and Jessica, when you're tapping an intro for the drums, and this is for drummers in general, in a studio setting, when you go tap, 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 boom, if you're giving a 4/4 intro, you leave the last two beats out because you don't want that on the tape. All right, so if it's a 4/4 intro that you're tapping, it's 1, 2, boom, boom. Got it? All right, that's just little things that just aggravate me, because then whoever's editing it has to do it even harder. It has his job cut out. And the tracking of the drums, though, and the tracking of the guitar really showed the tediousness of the studio experience, which people think musicians think it's, well, now I say people in general, the audience and the fans, they think it's glorious to be in a studio, which it is, but sometimes as you well may know, it's very tedious and very stressful, and because you want to get that right lick, you want to get that right beat, and it's sometimes you just can't get it for some reason, so you got to step away and come back to it. But so this showed a little bit of that tediousness and the pressure, and you guys were the only ones that had any kind of conflict, any kind of challenge. I didn't sense any conflict from any band except the Resistance in this, and the conflict was when somebody's mother was in the room, and I guess it was Jared's, and Jared says, "Come on, Mom, we're recording. You got to get out." I thought that was classic. I thought that was wonderful. I mean, it showed the seriousness, and it showed that you were just so focused on getting this task done, and you were absolutely right. When bands are recording, they should be alone. They should be just with the musicians, period. It's not a time for fans and friends to hang out and, hey man, that was great, yeah. And again, it's because time is money, traditionally, historically. In this setting, it wasn't, but it's something if you're going to continue in the recording business, you will find out that time is money. So that was pretty cool, and I think there were a lot of lessons learned in the Resistance footage versus St. Monday's and Last Man in Space. I'm assuming that only because I only got that from the Resistance, and that's because nobody told us anything on the other two. So as far as overall, it was entertaining and it was really fun, and I apologize for being really picky, but I had higher expectations for this task, and I certainly hope that you learned something. If you didn't learn something when you did this, I hope you learned something from my critique of it. It's the process is wonderful, and I just didn't sense that you grasped that process except for the Resistance. So here's to your future recordings and future learning and future process. Embrace it. Thank you.